forward for the Carmel Redevelopment Commission monthly report.
Hi, Council. Henry Mestetsky, the Director of the Redevelopment Commission. I want to talk about our activities for the last month. Probably the most exciting thing going on right now is that the city has issued a request for proposal for Lot 1. It's the former PNC Bank site. It's called Lot 1 because the very first lot of the very first plat of the town of Bethlehem, later renamed Carmel, is where the bank currently sits. So we wanted to respect that history, and so we put out a request for proposal. We, in there, discussed the things that the CRC and the taxpayers wanted to see, which includes a public plaza that honors our Rotary clock, some priority being given to for sale residential product and office, and obviously lots of free parking. We held a pre-RFP response meeting that was very well attended. It was also covered by the media, and there were a lot of developers, a lot of interest, including interest from outside of the state, money from other states potentially continuing to pour into Central Carmel. I think that's something on the site. We're going to see what the developers propose, but I think it's going to be something that's transformational for the Arts and Design District, and we're really looking forward to it. We'll be opening those May 1 at a CRC hearing. Monon Main continues to get built out. Those the townhomes there are almost done. As we head into the Midtown area, there's just a lot of progress all around. That is the view of the rail yard, the apartment complex looking north. And it's cool to see the contrast between, well, what we know was there before and then the plans and how they're taking shape. That's a better view of what was there before, and again, corporate headquarters and luxury apartments and things to do after 9 o'clock. And obviously for sale residential product is going to come next as the next phase of as everything gets further developed. Midtown Plaza should be done around July. That's a really, really exciting project. That Sunking is always packed with people. That's just going to continue to be. There's going to be multiple apartment complexes opening soon enough, and that's a lot of traffic for our local businesses. Midtown West is obviously progressing along as well. I wanted to get into City Center. Last year it was really exciting when ULI, the Urban Land Institute, a group that many real estate professionals belong to, named Carmel City Center one of the 3 American neighborhoods emerging as economic powerhouses. It was really neat to see us placed alongside the DC waterfront and a booming part of Charlotte, North Carolina. Business Insider obviously picked this up, and we got national attention for the progress that we're making in City Center and what it's meant for the city of Carmel. We also remember what it used to look like just 20 years ago or so when none of this was there. Most of the buildings, almost all the buildings are under construction now that were supposed to be as part of City Center Phase 2. And I'll just go through them individually. Obviously the garage is up. Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to put up first before everything else. And the garage has obviously benefited not just City Center, but that entire area, because we know that when we had 360,000 people visit the Christkindl Market last year, many of them park in that garage. When people come to see our shows at the Center for Performing Arts, when people come to our farmers market, everybody uses that garage. That's a true amenity for the city. Right now, the east side of that, Hamilton East, is getting built out. That is both residential and commercial. And then in the future, we'll see Hamilton West, which is the west part of that, get built out when the rest of it is as well. Lots of progress being made on Baldwin Chambers. That's the commercial side of that is, I believe, ready to be leased out. There's people living in the residential units, and Cake Bake Shop is coming to the first floor of that building as well. And that's really exciting. The Kent is also under construction. If I could point that out, the Kent is over here on the other side of 3rd. The Kent was ready to go a while ago. They were held up for about 10 months by, there was a utility that no one knew about that belonged to Vectren, and then Vectren was in the process of getting acquired by another company, and it held up the building of the Kent for about 10 months. The steel and the concrete should have been standing at this point, but that's what happens when utilities that you can't control go through a merger. They stop replying to emails, which is what happened on the Kent. Otherwise, it's ready to go. It's under construction now. The site work's been done, and they're pouring foundations. Obviously, the hotel is moving along. We did close on all the financing for that, I believe, as everyone knows. Our partner in that deal, Pedcor, closed on the loan side, and the city did privately place their bonds at really good rates as well. Permits were pulled this week for Playfair Holland. That is the building that is on the southmost side, south of the hotel. That is office on the first floor and luxury apartments above. For now, they're apartments, although Pedcor always has an opportunity to turn those into condos later, if they would like. And that should be starting to go. Between those two properties is the Windsor. Right now, Windsor is being used as a staging area for the construction of the hotel in the Playfair Holland. This is how you would typically build. Because there's a lot of construction going on, you need somewhere to store all the materials. So Windsor will go after Playfair Holland and the hotel are substantially complete. And that is a pretty view. I want to take a second to show, let's see. Just a quick video that shows what those buildings will look like. So this is looking south. So there we see the hotel. The Windsor is next. And Playfair Holland after that. And again, those permits have been pulled. They're ready to be built. I do want to draw our attention to just the type of development that you see in Carmel. Right now, nationwide, you have this 4/1 development where you have apartments over retail. And if you've driven around, even some of our neighbors, if you drive around nationally, these things are usually clones of each other. Some have purple sides, some have yellow sides, but typically this type of it again. This type of development, this 4/1 development, is a national trend, and most of them, in fact, architects hate this because they all look like the same exact apartment no matter where you set them down. Except when you get to Carmel and you get this type of architecture, this type of unique, nowhere else in the world architecture, and you get these types of building materials that make sure that these buildings last for just decades and decades and decades longer than the clone counterparts you see everywhere else. As we continue to build out City Center, we want to focus on protection of the taxpayers, but also we want to build it right. And this type of beautiful architecture is exactly what sets our city apart. So those are under construction, essentially. There's another nice view of the hotel, the Windsor and the Holland, which is the northern building on that side. There's another one. It's going to be really neat when this is all done. And I can just imagine the views when people are visiting our Christkindl Market, when people are there Saturday morning at the farmer's market. This is going to be beautiful, beautiful stuff, and truly unique buildings. Some of our other focus areas, again, obviously the proscenium. This is Carmel turning in an old warehouse into a, okay, there's usually a picture there, but there's not today. A truly transformational project where you have 600 parking spaces underground, and you have apartments and condos, probably the first wave of for sale residential coming soon. That will be the first building built. That's the one that's the rightmost building, and retail across from Kroger. And they're working on that podium now. This is what the corner is going to look like. It's we're talking right now to potentially some new headquarters moving in there. Car headquarters is under construction as well. That's a huge, huge win for the city of Carmel. And just north of the car headquarters, we just saw an announcement that Zotec, another nationwide company, is building their corporate headquarters just north of that site. So the US 31 and Illinois Street corridor is becoming a major, major tech hub of established companies. And that's really cool to see. And I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Councilor Finkham.
Henry, a couple questions for you. First off, I'm getting ready to do a newsletter. Think you can throw that deck and a document for me to borrow a couple slides from?
I would love to.
Thank you. And then also, I know we've had some conversation back and forth this evening from Mr. Shaver and Mr. Milam about documents and their availability. Are those available online? How can we get that information?
Yeah, so this is a, I feel like if I could just address this, and it's a bit of an odd conversation because I'm not political. I think there's some politics involved here. But I do represent, I do serve as the executive director of the Redevelopment Commission. It's 5 citizen volunteers, some appointed by the council, some by the mayor, and I have a fiduciary duty to them to kind of clear some of this stuff up, political or not. So maybe I'll do that now. As far as are these documents available, yes, the clerk treasurer should have them all. It's the clerk treasurer's job to put them all in Laserfish. I assume they've all been uploaded because they should be, but if they haven't, I'm also happy to provide them. Last time, I wasn't here last time, but as I understand it, Mr. Shaver, who seems to have left the room, was here, and he discussed where are the guarantees, where are the payments, right? He raised these questions. Last time he sat next to Fred Glenn, who's a guy running for office, and this is part of a strategic coordinated attack by them to raise a bunch of issues that don't exist. And I wouldn't be talking about this stuff, but I have a duty to my commission to defend what we do here. Let me just talk about for a second what the issue is for City Center and how Phase 2 was done. Petcor agreed to build buildings. Those buildings would generate tax revenue every year up to a certain projection, and then that tax revenue, that TIF dollars, pays back for infrastructure that gets built. Infrastructure that serves everybody. That same that Veterans Way garage is the infrastructure that we're talking about that everybody gets the benefit of. And essentially, when this deal was first done in 2015, the city needed to ensure 2 things. It wanted to ensure that we have beautiful architecture and good development, that we wanted, and that we had protection for our taxpayers. So the deal we put in place, and the IBJ just wrote about this. The deal that we put in place says you either build these buildings that pay a certain amount of tax revenue that gets captured to pay off the bond for the garage and infrastructure by a certain date, or if you don't build them by that date, you just pay the money. It's as simple as that. It protects the taxpayers because the bonds are getting repaid, but also development is not easy, and the development of beautiful buildings like this is not easy. And so if PEDCOR wants to take an extra year to develop a specific building that looks like this, all they have to do is make an extra payment, and they can do that. And by the way, we're talking about PEDCOR, probably our largest taxpayer here in the city, the gigantic nationwide corporation that decided to locate its headquarters here. This isn't just some mom and pop shop. Making TIF payments for them is not a difficult thing. So Fred Glenn and Mike Shaver want to concoct this thing that somehow someone's dropping the ball or someone is being wronged, and it's completely ridiculous. And look, I'm sorry, but Mike Shaver, and he's not here because he left, but he's not just some guy. He's a known person. He's like a famous person here. You just need to Google Mike Shaver and Carmel, and you have a bunch of stories that pop up about documents that he's previously submitted to council on behalf of the clerk treasurer, where he's talking about castrating politicians. No one in the city takes him seriously. No one in the municipal finance community takes him seriously. Everybody knows who this guy is. He's talking about submitting documents, talking about castrating public officials. So when Castration Mike Shaver and Fred Glenn sit there and they come up with these schemes, and they come over here and they write multiple letters to the editor filled with a bunch of nonsense. And by the way, that's all that gets printed. It's the letters to the editor with a big title that says, this is just opinion. We, as a reputable newspaper, have nothing to do with what this actually says. That's where that stuff gets printed. So they go, where are the guarantees? I believe that's what he said last time. The clerk treasurer's office has them. Where is the money? This is Googling the Reporter article that Councilor Worrell responded to this guy. Here's the money. The money got paid. There's an account at the clerk treasurer's office that receives either the TIF revenue, the tax revenue from existing buildings, or the PIAT payments. That's that extra money paid to PEDCOR if the buildings aren't up. It all goes into an account that sits in the clerk treasurer's office. Mike Shaver, my staff literally gets calls from staff of the clerk treasurer's office where they're collecting documents for Mike Shaver to then use and come here and talk about this stuff. It's in an account. At the clerk treasurer's office, it takes a button to show it all. But Mike Shaver gets multiple letters to the editor out screaming about where's the money. It's there in an account. It's the silliest issue, and we would never be having any of these conversations if it wasn't crazy political season, but it is. So I apologize for making this a thing, but he said one more thing. He said, he's talking about where's the Eastern Motor Court versus the Western Motor Court. He's talking about what happened to a previous allocation area that we used to have that went away and that we lied. Here's a map of City Center, okay? Previously, we used to have this hotel sit over the Western Motor Court. It did not. The tax revenue collected by that hotel, the Western Motor Court, was not going to pay the garage. It was just going towards the big TIF. The Eastern Motor Court was going to pay for the garage. What happened is that the hotel was larger than initially expected, and PEDCOR said, okay, you should just take all that tax revenue going to the big TIF. We will agree to build buildings and pay more money. This is PEDCOR volunteering, agreeing to make more payments so that all the taxes can get captured by the hotel to flow towards the city and not paying off the infrastructure. That is a huge win for the taxpayers. And to make it seem like that's not is nonsense. And this is This is literally Fred Glynn and castration Mike Shaver bringing a bunch of nonsense because it's political season. And I'm sorry, but I serve the commission and none of us are elected. We're here to work for the taxpayers.
All right. Thank you, Director Mestetsky. Do you have a follow-up question?
So the answer is yes, those documents are online.
Sorry, I got riled up. It's, yes, absolutely.
Thank you for your clarification, and thank you for answering that question.
Councilor Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to add a little clarification to what you said, because for some stupid reason these deals stick in my head. There were 11 parcels. Each parcel was to pay 1/11 times 110%.
Absolutely.
We're not getting 100% of the payment. We're getting 110% of the payment. If one of the 11 parcels, which turned into 10 parcels because of the deal you just said, so now each parcel pays 1/10 plus 10%. If a building overperforms, let's say it produces 120%, that does not make up for a building that would produce 95%. PEDCOR would still have to make up the difference between the 95 and the 110. There is not a loss in this. The layers that we showed, there's like 7 different layers, includes a guarantee that they did, which is a line of credit.
There's a $4 million letter of credit. That's a protection. Each building is guaranteed to pay 110% of the increment it's supposed to generate, and that's a guarantee related to each building. There's another guarantee by PEDCOR, the main entity, this powerhouse of a company that we have in the city that's guaranteed all of this, and all of it is 110% of the increment that would have needed. And we're talking about money that we use to build the garage that serves all the city center today. And I mean, we know that these guys have been sending all this stuff to all the papers. None of it gets printed in real life. It gets printed in opinion pieces in some of the papers that actually let it. It's a bunch of garbage. But you know, it's 30 days before election, so Fred Glenn and Mike Shaver show up with a bunch of nonsense.
Well, there is a schedule. I mean, it wasn't supposed to start from day one. It phases in. And if a parcel that they own never had a building built on it, that parcel would still pay 110% of the yearly payment towards the bond.
That's absolutely correct.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Carter.
Thank you, sir. There seems to be apparently a difference of opinion on whether or not these are online. I note while you were speaking the entire time, our clerk treasurer was sitting in the back making faces, shaking her head no, saying that apparently that's not the case, that she doesn't have the documents.
These bonds closed in 2015, I believe, 2014, 2015. The clerk treasurer historically puts everything on Laserfish. The document should be in her office. I'm not sure if she's put it on Laserfish or not. She should have, but I'm happy to reach out to her tomorrow morning to make sure that anything she doesn't have that we put online immediately.
Okay, Councilor Green.
Yeah, there is, I'd get away from the politics and the names. There is a perception by some that the delay in the buildings being constructed has some type of negative impact on taxpayers or the city. Can you just kind of, address that directly?
Yeah, there's absolutely no effect on the city or the taxpayers. There's 8 or 9 levels of protection to make sure. I mean, there's an account. This account pays back the bonds related to the public infrastructure. The account collects either tax revenue from buildings that were built on a schedule, or it collects just payments that PEDCOR has been making over the last year to if a building is not yet built. I mean, that is the best of both worlds. We're talking about beautiful, beautiful buildings, beautiful architecture. You got to build it the right way. And I am, for one, am happy that PEDCOR isn't throwing up a bunch of garbage all in the same month, that they're taking the time to design these buildings carefully, that they're taking the time to find the right corporate tenants that take up the office portions of these buildings. And PEDCOR's got a ton of money to make the payments if the buildings aren't up at a certain time frame. And honestly, I mean, the IBJ just ran a story. We're talking about Phase 2 includes one of their Pedcore's office buildings. It's done. It includes the Kent, which was held up by 10 months by Vectron Energy. It's under construction as we speak. It includes, the hotel's not part of that deal, but the hotel's under construction. It includes Baldwin Chambers, which is basically done. It includes the garage itself, that was the bulk of the money. It includes Hamilton East, which is under construction now. It includes Hamilton West, that wouldn't be under construction until Playfair Holland gets done. Playfair Holland, literally, they pulled permits this week ready to build. And the only thing remaining is Wren and Windsor, and because of construction timing and staging, you would build those buildings after the other stuff around there is done. And this is what we always plan for. We always plan for giving Pedcore the ability to slightly delay their own construction of their own buildings so long as they pay the money in, as they have, and they've protected the taxpayers. So there's absolute nothing negative here. There's no concerns. And again, Pedcore is a giant, giant company and one of our largest taxpayers and one of our largest employers. And we appreciate that they're here.
Go ahead, Councilor Green.
Yeah, just the follow-up. I mean, I appreciate all that. There is no adverse impact into how much interest is going to have to be paid. I mean, that's one of the things that's being said.
Correct.
Is that
there's zero.
So zero. There's no
Zero
increase in
adverse
cost
impact.
whatsoever. Okay, that's good.
Any other questions? So I would just like to maybe just give a little bit more detail, a little bit almost in the same context as Councilor Green, to my colleagues up here. I do want to make sure that everyone understands, and those that might be watching this exchange, that Mr. Shaver approached the council at the last meeting, and I made the false assumption of assuming that he wanted answers to the questions he asked us. So I provided those, although I was disappointed to know that there was a letter to the editor. The first letter to the editor went into the paper the very next day. So as a council, we did not even have a chance to respond appropriately as he addressed this body. But I did, 2 days later, respond to the issue with what I thought were, which I guarantee you were legitimate and accurate facts. He came back with additional questions. We took the time to answer those, and it all boils down to my miscalculation that it really all comes down to this perception that something is being hidden, that the documents have some fact in them that we are unable to provide in these other venues and in these other formats, unfortunately, in the letters to the editor. So I'm sure that these documents are being processed. I'm looking at John Oberlander. There are literally boxes of documents that have been requested. I would ask that the clerk treasurer get with the CRC, and has always been the case. I mean, we've been very proud as a community that the city puts all of our documents in the spirit of transparency on Laserfish, and if it's not being done or something is missing, I would ask you to take the steps to make sure that it gets online as quickly as possible. This is literally, I don't know if it's hundreds of man-hours to generate these Freedom of Information request records, but again, I will state we tried in good faith to get the answers to the people who asked them, and that's fair. I have no problem providing answers, but it's when these other requests get made. Director, do you have anything else we need to move ahead?
No, I apologize because I'm not here to get political, but it's
Do you have anything else? We're good. Do you have anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we are going to move forward. I am going to now ask for a report from the Finance Committee, please.
We have not met.
Okay. May I have a report from Land Use and Special Studies?
We have not met either.
All right, now we will go to the Carmel Historic Preservation Commission. Their quarterly